Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on using data effectively. I'm Caroline Perry, NZ Director at Break, the road safety charity. Firstly, a huge thank you to the sponsors of today's event, SmartTrack. We wouldn't be able to run our webinars and other events without the support of our partners and sponsors like them. And if you're new to our webinars, Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Break, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles being driven for work. To learn more about what we do and to access fleet safety resources and more events, please visit globalfleetchampions.org. If you're not already a member, you can sign up for free on the website. And if you're not aware of Break, we're a road safety charity working to prevent road deaths and injuries, make communities safer and support people bereaved and injured in crashes through a range of initiatives, one of which is Global Fleet Champions. We also run other initiatives and activities such as Road Safety Week each year in New Zealand and Beep Beep Days for young children, and we provide free support resources to people who've been bereaved in crashes. And I'll talk at the end of the session about a couple of initiatives and other events and projects that we've got coming up over the next few months. So firstly, on to today's first speaker. I'm delighted to introduce Richard Biffin, who is the Chief Technical Officer at SmartTrack. Richard has over 25 years of experience in the technology sector, specialising in software as a service-based businesses across multiple industries. And with a strong background in strategy, product development and innovation, he's helped organisations to harness technology to drive growth, efficiency and transformation. Richard brings deep expertise in leveraging data, cloud platforms and emerging technologies to deliver scalable solutions that meet the evolving needs of modern enterprises. So we're really grateful for him joining us today, and I'll hand over to you, Richard.
Great stuff. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm just going to share my screen, bring this up. Let me see if this actually works okay. Hopefully everyone can see that and it looks normal. Seems to be the right way for me. So yeah, look, it's great to be here. And I think what I want to do is sort of take you through some of the rationale around how to use data effectively, why it matters, a case study and some new technical sort of innovation that we're working on at SmartTrack to try and make use of data and surface a lot of information that we have in the systems. And if you're coming from any other provider as well, that there's certain ways that you can get access to that. So I think, why fleet data matters. It's quite obvious that we have these systems in place for a reason. We want to be able to make decisions from them. And data is often in these platforms and providers and certain tooling and other platforms that you might be using. It really only matters though when you can get access to this information. It makes it easier to make decisions. But really, if you can't get access to this information, then you just can't you can't use it effectively. So some of the reasons why it matters is the list here: prevention. This comes from being able to report on what's been going on in your organization. What are people doing? How are they driving? What is accessible? So it really gives you an idea of how do you make decisions from the information that you have available. And that's kind of preventative. You want to sort of see that you can make change, and that requires action. But before action, you need to have access to this information. You need to know where it's coming from, why it's coming. And then at that point, you can do something about it. But it's not just about looking at data from what's come in. You also need to be able to have access to functionality to provide communication and contact. So some of the information and data that comes in, it's not just about looking at it retroactively. It's about taking a proactive approach. And in this case, for, say, fleet safety or people safety, it comes down to having access to be able to make a response, being able to get in touch with someone when you need to. And there's a number of ways that we do this at SmartTrack, but it's about being able to reach out, stay in contact, and make sure that you can actually reach out when you need to. And these can be for things like emergency responses, crashes, but just being able to essentially make contact when you need to. And that's quite tough at times when cell coverage is light or non-existent in some places. So again, that kind of functionality is a big part, especially these days when we have access to phones. Most people have a phone these days, but that's not always great when there is limited cell coverage. So there's other ways that we do that. We have satellite technology, and we can look at some of those things here today. But also optimize operations. That is a big part of what the data we use and store, and people use it for making decisions around their fleet, optimizing their fleet. These are expensive resources that the organizations have. Been able to optimize them, use them effectively, but also make sure that they are operating how they need to for the different organizations. And we can talk a bit more about that as we go through this, but it really is often quite different depending on the organization requirements. It's not always just a one size fits all. What utilization means to one organization can be completely different to what utilization means to someone else. So having an understanding of your requirements is a big part of being able to use this data effectively. So sources of fleet data, telematics, it's an obvious part. It's a location device that sits in the vehicle. It tracks your location, your bearing, your speed, what the vehicle's doing, but it also has a lot of other technology hanging off of that, certainly these days around crash detection, and access to the accelerometer, the gyro. There's a lot of information that comes off these devices these days. And again, what do you do with this information? What can you use it for? And how do you use this information to make decisions? And so some of the other parts is the emergency systems. Like I said, the dash switches. We have personal locator beacons. That's a little physical device, looks like a little walkie-talkie. We have a number of a range of different options for that. Some of them talk via satellite. That means that they're available everywhere. Other ones are just cell, but essentially, depending on your requirements, you might just need a certain device to essentially have that type of connection and communication. Incident reporting. So this is not just around what the vehicle's doing. This is kind of what the driver is feeding back into the system. So this could be drivers logging an incident report, what's the current state of the vehicle, what is actually how the trip was, anything that they need to record. This is, again, more information that gets fed back into the system, which then you can use to report on. Analytics and predictive insights. This is around seeing different parts of the system working together to then make sure that you've got certain calculations and stuff that are available. An obvious one here is like predictive maintenance, where you see certain maintenance records come in. That way you can use predictive analysis to figure out if this failure is going to occur again in a certain amount of time. And all of this, again, feeds into being able to make decisions about this. And we have a number of sort of booking solutions within SmartTrack, and one of them is essentially just recording information around the booking, but not just for one driver, but it could be for shared fleets where they have to share the vehicle. That booking information is really important to understand the current state of the vehicle and is it in the right state for the next journey. So all of this feeds into the platforms, and then how these platforms visualize it for yourselves to actually make decisions about your organization. So the case study I'll go through here is a customer that we've been working with. They were really heavily focused on, the driving identified as the number one safety. And so what that was identifying their current fleet, understanding their drivers, and then understanding what their requirement was. And they were operating across New Zealand. They worked in remote areas that didn't have cell coverage, so there had to be an alternative solution for that type of location information. But what we did is deploy, or I suppose this came with a challenge, and the challenge was the remote driving in locations that were out of cell coverage. They often were alone with, I guess, students or very much a learner type situation where they didn't have a lot of experience. So something to, I guess, keep in mind when we were collecting this information and then providing it, I guess, they were using to interpret was what is actually happening with these inexperienced drivers. And so what they were doing is they wanted to have a need for this visibility. They needed to sort of understand what the current state was to actually then make decisions. And their emergency response capability, big part of that is because they're in remote locations, they're not always accessible by cell, they can't always use their phone. What can we provide them as a way to then make contact if they need to? So the technology deployed, GPS tracking the car with crash detection. Now, crash detection is an interesting one because it can mean different things again to different organizations. What we have at SmartTrack is a couple of separate products, and one could mean high impact and rollover. And that's what it says on the box, high impact. It means that essentially it's calibrated to a point that if it have an impact and it doesn't meet a certain threshold, it's not going to report, because really it's the ones that are high impact that could mean a lot. What that does mean is that they can't reach out. They could be unconscious in a big crash. They could be upside down. Their phone could be in the back, or whatever's happened. Essentially, the system, if it meets that high impact threshold, it will alert and it will create a response, and action can be taken. So that's not always the case for every company. They don't always want the high impact. They actually just want to know any crash detection. They want to know if it's a fender bender. And so I think very calibration on this is actually important, and it's really up to us to understand the requirement of the customer to be able to work with them to surface that data. Emergency dash switches, you can see on that photo there, that's actually my car. That you can actually push that button and it doesn't do anything. Mine's actually been disabled, but that is for someone to reach out and go, I've something's gone wrong, I need help, and the alert will send back to the platform, and again, then action can be taken. And for this particular customer, again, they were in remote locations and they needed a satellite connected way of making contact and responding. So there's a range of technology here that was deployed for this particular customer, which helped them, I guess, get the results they needed to understand their data, but also to provide the right safety requirements necessary for their drivers, their learners, their entire operations. So the result with surfacing this information was a 65% reduction in overspeeds. Now, this is just because they were able to see it happening. When you can see this information, you can take action. And that's the point of being able to use data effectively, is being able to take action from this. This then followed into organizational change, which they were able to get the training that they needed within their systems. We've got some issues here with certain drivers. They need certain training. The fact that they are actually able to surface this information and take action from it is the biggest area of result they're able to see. And what they were able to do with that is essentially build in this safety culture. And I'll talk more about that in the next one, but there's two sort of ways around when you put tracking in a vehicle. We've heard it on both sides of the argument. Essentially, you've got some that will look at, say, tracking and overspeeding or driver behavior as kind of a punitive or a disciplinary type measure. But really, it's not the case. And this particular organization weren't looking at it like that. They were looking at ways of reinforcing better driver behavior, using it as a positive. And the results have shown the ones that are sort of looking at it from sort of a punitive or disciplinary do not have the same results. In fact, we've had some in the past a few years ago that were actually looking to remove tracking because it was used as disciplinary and it really wasn't, they saw it as ineffective. But that's not a data problem, that's more of an organization problem. And so really, if you're looking from an organization, the best way is to look at this information, take action, but then reinforce it with the positive side of this. Drivers are getting training they need, then they're using that to then help these drivers be better. And that incentive, the incentive side of that, or the positive side of that, is having a much better result than focusing on the negative side of driver behavior. And to the fact that even this quote here, drivers were asking to be tracked because they wanted to essentially have this incentive. They wanted to be available. They wanted to be they wanted to know there was a safety net there. They could be reached, they could be tracked, they knew where they were. This actually was a positive part from the organization to focus on this. It really helped create a much better safety culture within the organization than focusing on the negative. So again, surfacing this data led into providing a much better safety understanding, and it grew the safety culture. They were then able to focus on things like the training around this, and gamification of it. And I know it sounds a little silly when we talk about safety culture, but the competition side, it wasn't so competitive. It was more around just showing people that they were performing well. They were focusing on the positives. There was incentives. They were focusing on rewards. Again, it's not a punitive measure. It's a safety. There was someone there to reach out to. They knew they were being tracked. They could reach out if they needed to. They could send an emergency alert. All of this then made it much better for the drivers and the people in these organizations to feel safer when they're doing their daily job. And also then reinforcing that with giving the drivers the information about themselves. So self-monitoring, making sure that they understood how well they were stacking up against their colleagues. This, again, reinforced that sort of, I guess, need to, or just the want to be have better driving behavior. If you do have any questions about that, you can scan the QR code there. There is a case study online, which definitely, if you want to, you can just grab the case study. But if you need to at the end, please reach out to me or anyone from SmartTrack, and they'll be able to give that to you. So one of the things, as I said, data is really only valuable if you can do something with it. And we have tons of data within SmartTrack, and if you've got other providers, they would have the same. It's about surfacing that and getting some insights from it to actually make decisions. So these are a range of different sort of options that we have within our platform: driver safety scores, risk drivers, certain trip information, overspeeding. There is a lot of information that is possible. There is a lot of reports. There's many that have been kind of customized depending on the requirement of the customer. And you can also reach out and get very much tailored reporting for your organization. But there's kind of a set standard of certain things that we provide, and most fleet management systems and telematics providers will do this. But again, it's as long as you can get access to this, then you can start to make decisions around what you want to do with it. And I suppose when we start thinking, well, what else can we do? What else do you need? Then we can start thinking around, well, okay, where does it go from here? And we start looking at the future of fleet data and essentially what we can do and how we can sort of present it to you. And if we think around sort of what I was saying is that you often get information and retroactively look at it, and then you put training and actions around it. Well, there's also a way that we can do sort of predictive analysis around this and then start to kind of proactively focus in on areas that may not actually then have to become an issue later down the track. And so I think the idea around this, and these are just some reports that we've got. By the way, none of this data is taken from anywhere. This is all simulated data, if you've got any questions about that. But what we can do is look at driver behavior, and we can kind of look at the ones that are at risk. And we can build these reports for you. We can export this information for you, and most providers can. But we can look at how drivers are behaving and then kind of predict based on the information we have on how well they will do in the future, unless action is taken. So this is kind of a way that you can say, we'll put driver training in. We've got some, we've got some results from that. Has it had any effect? And then we can start to see whether or not we're going to have a reduction, or if there's still going to be some areas. And what we do then, we can then overlay that with more information around, well, where are these drivers going? And start to look at the different route analysis around the trips, the distance, and the certain locations that they're going to. And is there any areas of the information that is more prone to issues than others? When you've got this information and been able to sort of merge it into one, the idea is that you can then make decisions based on all of this analysis and essentially overlay it into something like this here, which is a heat map. So this is available if you needed to find this sort of stuff out, we can do this now. But again, this is sort of looking at it not from a what's happened, but where it would be. we can do this based on information we already have and start to forecast if there's actually going to be a concern. Now, if I look at this one here, I would be sort of looking at the different routes that would be available, the drivers, and then sort of understanding, well, Route 5, we've got some issues here. It's got a high risk, but apart from one driver. And really what any of these reports or any of this data that comes out of here, this is the stuff that you should be using to ask these questions. It's all around going, well, why does driver 5, the only driver on this route, actually any good? There could be reasons for that. But again, surfacing this information, having it available, and then asking questions of this is essentially the biggest reason why you want to have this data and then being able to use it effectively. And that's essentially what all of these reporting, all the reporting and information that we have and collect is for. It's for you to ask questions about this data. And so what I want to do now, I'm just going to go through, I'm going to just do a little demo of essentially something that we're working on in SmartTrack, and essentially show you what kind of what we're sort of focusing on is a data surfacing, getting access to certain information, more of a lot easier than sort of just building reports. I'll just go back here. These reports and any other reports within any sort of system, they very much are something that we would create. We'd build for you, and there's a reason for that. The data's there, you ask for something, you need to know certain information, we create a report, and then it's available for you. You can export it and do what you need. But like I said at the start, data means different things to different people. Not every organization has the same type of requirements for their data. I'll tell you an example. Utilization can mean different things to different organizations, because a vehicle that leaves a geofence and goes down the road for 8 hours and sits there for 8 hours is considered utilized. Now, for another organization, a vehicle that leaves a geofence and goes down the road and sits there for 8 hours is not utilized, because it's just sat there in another location. It hasn't moved all day. So that's not considered high utilization. So depending on the organization, it could mean different things. And so what I want to do now is just show you a demo. I'll stop sharing this one, and I will go into, bring this one up here. This one. The idea of accessing information that you require is essentially, like I said, surfacing it to a point that you can just ask questions. Now, back in March, I did a quick talk around AI and how the AI is available to essentially ask questions of your data set. And so what we're doing here is scoping your data within the platform. This is obviously SmartTrack here, but if you've got another provider, they may be doing something similar. But the idea is that instead of building a report or having a report that's sort of customized to your particular requirement for that certain data set that you're asking for, you should just be able to ask questions of your data set. And when I say scoping, what I mean is that every piece of data that comes in, all these events, all these alerts, all these events and notifications, whatever it is, it's all restricted and limited to your organization. So when we talk about AI, I'm sure everyone's talked or used ChatGPT or something. That there is just any information it has access to. Well, we don't do that here. Well, obviously, we scope it to your particular data set. It means all your organization, your events, your users, your drivers, vehicles, maintenance, all of that stuff is restricted and scoped just to that. So when I say it's scoped data, all it's working on is your information, nothing else. And so instead of having a report and going, well, I need to have an overspeeding report. I need to have it so that it can be filtered by month. We can now just essentially ask questions of the data set and start to surface information around that. So it doesn't need to be something that is pre-built. We don't need to say, well, I need a report for this type of thing. It can be something you can just use to query and essentially provide a way to just access information from what's available. And so this demonstration here, hopefully you can see this and it's coming up. All I've done is ask it a very simple question: show overspeeding events this month. And it's gone down, picked out the IDs of all the events. By the way, just for everyone's, all this data is 100% simulated. This is not a reference to anyone or anything. It's all 100% simulated. But you now can just essentially ask questions. Instead of having a report and exporting and taking it there and massaging it somewhere else, you can just query it. You can just ask it questions and find out information. And you can just keep this going with a range of different options that you can find out, not just around safety or utilization. You've got emissions. We store emission stuff. We have emission reporting available in the Smart Track now, maintenance reporting, EV reporting. But again, it's around accessing this information in a way that's not just available, but also you can interpret it. And this is a big thing for people in organizations that don't have access to things like uh, they're not they're not data analysts, they're not business analysts. They are operators, fleet managers, and in some cases they're admin staff, and they get asked questions around, well, do we have the right size fleet? Or what are our high-risk drivers? Now, this often can be quite difficult for organizations to access. They have to ask for a customer report, or they've got to export information. They've got to pull it out of one location. They've got something over here. But essentially, being able to just query your data, just ask questions of your data, can now give you information which can answer those questions for you. So this is something that we are working with now. We want to try and experiment with this to make sure that it is scoped correctly. As I said, it's very much, we want it to be working on your data, and there's a lot of protection governance around this from SmartTrack that we put in place so that we don't get any data leakage. And I said, when we're working on a data set, we're not working on whatever's available out there. We are confining it just to your information. So what it's come back with here, it's looked at the data set and then provided certain information based on just a very simple question. So this here, I believe, is going to help organizations reach more of their data than they've been able to through just a standard report. And I think it's going to help people query information that they might not have even thought of being able to ask before. So instead of just getting a weekly report on your overspeeds, it's about now being able to dive into that and ask more questions, not just around what's a bad driver, but is there a certain location that they could be having these incidents on? Is it a particular road that they're having these incidents on? It's about just having access to be able to ask these certain questions instead of just having a report that you then have to work through or interpret or move or export and massage and merge into something else. It's about just making this data a lot more accessible and a lot more conversational and a lot more, it's easier to interpret than having to read through charts and analysis and stuff. It now can just be questions that you can ask. Now, everyone knows AI has the ability to hallucinate, and I'm sure there's probably a few people on the call thinking, how does this get around it? There are guards and ways that you can reduce that down. In fact, you can actually eliminate it. And the reason to do this, or a way that you can do this, is that when an AI is asked a question, it always wants to respond with an answer. It won't just say, I don't know, but you can actually put guards in place to stop that. When it doesn't know, it's okay to say, I don't know. And at that point, you can then figure out, well, this is something to investigate. If it doesn't know, why? Does it not have access to something? Is the data just not available? And you can actually put certain guards in place to stop it. So hallucination is getting reduced. As I said, this is your data. It's very much confined just to your data. So it doesn't have that kind of leakage that you would have from, say, a ChatGPT is just making stuff up. This is very much considered to be your particular information that it's using. And so there's no change to it. It is just interpreting and then providing the feedback and the information. And this goes across all of the different information that we have from the data. So this is something that I think we really want to sort of dive into, because I think providing easier access to a lot more information is a big part of what we want to do here at SmartTrack. And again, really want to sort of work with customers that want to explore more around accessibility and surfacing this information to make it easier to understand, easier to interpret, and essentially just a way you can ask questions. So I'll just bring that up. Again, if there is any questions around this, I think it's that one there. Yes, it is. Please do reach out to myself or anyone at SmartTrack, we are kind of working, wanting to sort of understand if what we could do here to help organizations access their information. And essentially, yeah, just if there's any questions around this, if you do want to reach out, my name's there, my email's there. Hopefully you do, and hopefully there'll be some questions at the end, and happy to take them. But that's it for me. But thank you so much.
So we'll move straight along to our second speaker today, which is Hamish Mackey, Director and Principal Researcher at Mackey Research. Hamish is the co-director there, and he has over 25 years of research and consultancy experience in various areas of human factors and ergonomics, with the last 20 years spent mostly in the transport sector. And as a certified human factors professional, all of Hamish's work has the underlying theme of more human-focused systems, and he has a particular focus on road safety, health and safety, and sustainable transport. Hamish is also an active committee member of both the Australasian College of Road Safety NZ chapter and the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of New Zealand, and was recently on the board of the Health and Safety Association of New Zealand too. So we're delighted that he could join us today and share his expertise. So over to you, Hamish.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. I appreciate it. I'm just going to present my present in Teams. Hopefully that works. Here we go. Sorry. That should be coming through shortly. Here we go. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we've got that. Thanks, Hamish.
Excellent. Great. Okay. So I'm just going to briefly take a slightly sort of broader view of using data and in particular work-related road safety. Just following on from that great presentation from Richard, and I really liked how Richard talked about using data to make decisions, and that's actually that broader context around data is a lot of what I'm going to talk about here today. So good to hear. I won't do the intro because Carolyn's already done it, but as an outline, what I'm going to talk about is just give you a bit of background around a couple of examples of how data has been very useful in the past for some of the projects that we've done, and make some comparisons of that. And then I'm going to talk about the logic of change. And you're probably wondering what that is, but really it's about how we get to the outcomes that we're really looking for. Then I'll look at how we might look upstream with our data more. And again, I'll explain that, taking more of a systems view, and then finish off with a few conclusions. So just as a bit of background, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of how data has been very effective in previous projects. This is firstly, the rural intersection active warning system, or the intersection speed zones and more recent terminology. And this was a very successful project. This system is now been implemented widely in New Zealand and in Australia. And basically what it does is that you might have seen these as you're driving around, that the speed limit is suddenly reduced at an intersection. These will all be high risk intersections where there's a high risk of death and serious injury. And what it does is basically when there's the potential for a collision, for example, a vehicle on a side road, then it'll just temporarily reduce the speed limit, and it just gives people more time to react and also mitigates the energy in any crash that might happen. Now, the reason this system has been so successful is that there was really a really robust sort of problem identification process, a piloting process. This is what picture you can see there is the first implementation in Himatangi in the Manawatu over 10 years ago. And then a really, really robust evaluation process, and that gave us very, very strong evidence for the success of the system. We didn't know whether it would work or not to start with, but what we've shown over time is that it's been very successful, and that's given, I guess, policymakers and road authorities the confidence to invest in this particular system. If I just go to another example, this is looking more at truck drivers, and this is sort of older data where we've looked at the sleep of truck drivers, and you can see there a range of sort of hours of sleep reported through sleep diaries, and then activity monitors that we use to actually directly measure people's sleep as well. And this was part of a sort of a broader program of work that we looked at, looking at sleep and fatigue, and working with others in the commercial transport sector. Now, the interesting thing here is that it was sort of really interesting at the time, and And I think now what you have is more sophisticated sort of measurement tools like wristwatches and things. And you do have some pretty proactive companies doing some excellent things in this space. Probably what I'd say though is that at a national scale, what we haven't seen is a national level, I guess, response or um, um, solutions for fatigue management and sleep and truck drivers, like the level of success we've seen in that previous example, the rural intersection active warning system. So I just wanted to make the point that we can collect lots of data. We can really understand what's going on and use it to assess problems. But until we sort of embed that data within a framework, within a program, and ultimately within decision making and investments, then perhaps we don't get the most out of that data. So that sort of brings me on to the logic of change. How is it that you move through that actual decision making process? And very simply, what I'm going to present here is it's really important to understand what your problem is. And I know that's such a simple thing, and you probably hear it quite a lot, but it's amazing how often we use things when it's not responding to a really well-defined and identified problem. So a lot of time spent on problem definition and understanding what that is really important. And of course, data can be helpful for that. But it's really important that whatever solution that you develop is based on that problem. So you're matching the solution to the problem that you've got. And then it's also important, likewise, that solution is actually going to give you the outcomes that you need. So sometimes we call this a logic model or a theory of change, but really it's just important to make sure that whatever it is you're doing, you've got a really strong problem, you've got the solution that's going to match it, and you're going to get the outcomes accordingly. So that's in its most simplest form, but I'm now just going to expand that a little bit and look at some of the decision-making sort of tools that we developed recently as part of New Zealand Transport Agency's Harm Reduction Action Plan for Work-Related Road Safety. Now, we carried out this work in partnership with others, and basically what the HRAP, or the Harm Reduction Action Plan, did was that it gave us two things. One was a list of interventions that could be done within the areas of work-related road safety, and they could have been things from technological responses to policy things to even road infrastructure things. And then the second thing was to develop a tool which we called the investment decision process, which is what you see on the screen here. And that is basically a process by which you can actually make decisions about what you should invest in. So there's all sorts of things we can invest in and spend our time and our money on. The question is what, and what is going to give us the most effective outcomes and actually solve our problems. And so what the IDP here does is it takes us through a series of questions, starting from problem definition through to the pathway to the outcomes that we're looking for, as I've just shown you in the previous slide. And then, how it is we might sort of test and prototype something and ultimately evaluate it. And so by stepping through that, what you should do is that we'll get to is basically anything that you are thinking of investing in. You should have a very robust decision-making process by which you've decided that, yes, this is actually going to make a difference in our sector or our company, and it's worth investing in. So by using it, you then de-risk investments, you get more effective outcomes, and overall you've just got more responsible and robust spending of money and time. So there's a slightly more sort of complicated version of this. It's got sort of sub-questions that goes with it. I'm not going to go through all these now. But basically, within a 2-hour session or a 1 to 2 hour meeting, even, with key people in the room, people that are informed enough to answer some of these questions here, you can actually come to a pretty good conclusion about whether you should be investing in something or not. And that could be at a company level. You could be doing this within a business. Do I invest in a safety feature in a truck or not? It could be used at a national level by NZTA or a road controlling authority or whatever, or a road transport authority or association. So that's the beauty of it, is it can be sort of as informal or formal as you like. And as part of this project, what we did is that we tested it with a couple of example kind of interventions. And what you can do is, why is that not coming up? Sorry, sorry, this one. What you can do is arrive at a conclusion about your investment, and we just sort of came up with these 4 categories based on the assessment of going around that investment decision process. You might have a very strong rationale for investment at the end of it. At the end, you might have a very poor rationale for investment, and then you've got in between as well. So what we did was we actually tested it with the concept of aftermarket blind spot information systems. This is something that's been considered for sort of vehicles here in New Zealand at an industry and a government level. And the question is, are they any good or not? Is this something we should be spending our time thinking about and investing in and testing? So what we did is that we set up a mock sort of 2-hour workshop within the project team with the information that we had at hand, the evidence that we had at hand, and we went through the IDP. And our overall assessment on that was that aftermarket blind spot information systems are something that are pretty early in development here in New Zealand, in a New Zealand context, perhaps something that's used a bit more overseas in places like the UK and London, as part of the programs they've got there for heavy vehicles in the city. Or potentially it's got potential for investment with more information. But I think there are a bunch of conditions that they still need to prove themselves in if there was a rationale for widespread investment here in New Zealand. So that was the overall conclusion that we came to, and that conclusion was supported by industry people generally as well. And also in other organisations, people have been using this investment decision process to assess other safety options. So it's certainly at this stage there's some promise here and the potential for going through this kind of process. Now, the other thing I just wanted to talk about in this brief presentation was just this concept of looking upstream, and I'm just going to explain what I mean about that just briefly here. We know that when crashes happen, they don't just happen simply because of the actions of a person or simply because of something that happens in the environment because of a vehicle or the road. We know that in every single crash, there's a context that's set for that crash, and that might be decisions that are made by individuals or by organisations before the crash. It could be by the sort of playing field that's been set by regulators and other sort of policymakers and things like that. And then what happens is that this context of factors comes together, paints the picture or sets the scene for a crash, and then allows the oops, sorry, you're still seeing the IDP slide. Oh, that's funny. I'm looking at the upstream. Can people see a system map on my picture?
I can, Hamish, yes.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
and
cool.
others can too. So
Yeah, I think on present mode you can sometimes get a bit lost, but I think there might be a button that links to the presenter or something. But yeah, okay, cool. So we're looking at the system map here, and basically, so what I was just saying was that when a crash happens, there's this multiple system factors that come together that results in a crash. So often we're focused on the data that is about the people, the vehicles or the road or things that are basically at the coalface or in the context of that crash. But if we know how crashes actually happen, then what does the data look like further up in the system? What about the sort of the policies and processes, the culture of the company, the way that the context is set for the crash by the company, but also other actors involved like road controlling authorities and others. And even, what does data look like at the regulatory space? That really sets the game for how the transport system works. So what I'm saying here is that, data often to us is exciting, technological, often numbers-based stuff, but actually it can be about other things that are wider in the system, policies and processes, culture, ways of working, and so on and so forth. And it's important to make sure we don't exclude those things as data. Even things like interviews and qualitative data and things are really, really important as well. So just a sort of a brief demonstration of how how this data can come together. This was what we call an AXI map, which I guess follows the sort of socio-technical approach to understanding crashes, as I've just described. This was actually carried out by Claire George when she was working on this project, and it was for looking at fatal and serious crashes and work-related road safety. And basically, this was it was a real case, but we changed aspects of it just to protect people's identity. But there were a lot of people injured in it, and a driver was killed in a taxi van. And certainly, when you look at the vehicle and the driver and the road environment, there are so many things that really point to why this crash happened. But actually, when we look upstream, we see there are questions about the fatigue policies and the fitness to drive policies that companies have. There are questions about how medical personnel sign off people to be fit for driving. And so this is really, really important information and context that actually sets the scene for these crashes actually happening. And there's a whole lot of other rich information across the system here, that we can get. And obviously, it's different type of data. It has to come from investigations, from interviews, from coroner's reports, from serious crash reports, and it's a different kind of data than what we normally I guess used to seeing. But if we are able to be organised enough to get this data, we get a really, really rich picture of what it is that's coming together to lead to fatal and serious crashes. So that's the two things that I really want to focus on, but I'm just going to sort of finish with some concluding statements here. We've actually got more access to data than ever before. I mean, we've got such impressive technology, and the vehicle-based technology that we're seeing, like Richard showed before, is incredibly impressive. It's really, really useful, and I'm really pleased that he talked about the positive use of that data and how it can be used in the right way and the wrong way, and it's really good to see that people are learning that to see that we've got to be using that data in the right way. But how do we use that massive sort of range of data available to us? What are your goals, and what's the logic going from your problems through to your solutions and your outcomes? And we can test solutions using data, but using a framework to make sure that our overall performance is really sort of structured in inquiry and data, using things like the investment decision process, like I showed before, and organizational data, as well as sort of that coalface data that we're used to seeing, is really important, and we need to make sure that we have access to that as well if we really want to make a big difference in the areas of work-related road safety. So that's all from me, and Carolyn, I'll hand back to you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Hamish. That was all really useful information as well. Really appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind stopping sharing your screen, and I'll ask Richard to also unmute and put his camera back on as well. That would be great. And then we can focus on some questions. So if we do a quick round of questions. I've got a couple of questions here, but also if you've got a question for Richard or Hamish or both of them, if you can put it in the Q&A, that's great, and I'll keep an eye on that as well. So just to start off with, Hamish, as you've just spoken, I've got a question here for you, and that I think you mentioned that some organisations have already been using HRAP, which is great. Is there a way of sharing some of those outcomes or how people have been using it to help other organisations to understand how they can use it, or how other operators have used it to help inform their investment decisions?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think ultimately it would be useful if the outcomes from these things are shared. I'm not aware of the I know I'm sort of hearing sort of secondhand through industry groups and things that people have been using it, so I'm not precisely sure of the best way for these lessons to be shared. But also, I guess the other thing to do would be to go back to sort of central agencies like the road transport associations, Waka Kotahi, other organisations, and just sort of understand at their levels whether people are using this and what they're actually finding from it. Because I do agree it would be good to sort of, now that we've had a sort of a collaborative approach to developing this approach, to actually have a collaborative approach to sharing the findings.
Yeah, that's great. Really useful. Thanks, Hamish. As well, a question for you, Richard, is how do you work with, obviously you mentioned that organizations get lots of different types of data, whether that's from telematics and various other things. How do you work at SmartTrack with potentially other providers that your organizations might have, for example, insurers, driver training providers, people like that? Are there ways that you link in with or can link in with other providers to help customers get the data across the different aspects of their program that they want that to tie it all together?
Yeah, we're pretty flexible with how we would integrate with other organizations or providers. We take whatever is available, and then essentially we can build out whatever is needed to surface that information. We have a number of, I guess, APIs and other integrations available. Again, it's working with the customer, understanding the requirements, and then being able to elevate that so it's actually accessible and interpreted.
Thanks, Richard. That's great. Quick second question for you, Hamish. Can 8Trap also be used, is it appropriate to be used by people who are overseas as well, not just New Zealand? Can it be utilised there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. When that project was carried out, we had engagement with people mostly in New Zealand, but it was certainly open to people overseas, and it was very much a publicly facing sort of project. And for a while, we did actually have all the tools like the investment decision process and things on a separate website available to the public. That's now been discontinued, but I'm more than happy to share I think you're going to share the slides anyway, and certainly it's relevant to people overseas. It really just provides a framework by which anyone at a formal level or an informal level can just get a bit more robustness about their decision making, and you can plug data into that process, but absolutely for people overseas as well.
That's great, Hamish. Thank you. A question to both of you. I've not seen any other questions come through Q&A. So if anyone does, you've still got a little bit of time. But just quickly, I'll wrap up with one question looking at the future. And obviously, we saw a lot from Richard around AI and the future there. What do you think, each of you, is the biggest sort of challenge and opportunity in relation to data going forward? I know that's a big, broad question, but one thing that's a big sort of challenge and or opportunity in the future, Richard?
I think it's just the accessibility of information and having it in a format in a way that it actually makes sense. So, like I demonstrated before, there is so much data available, but if it's not in a way that is easily able to interpret, understand, it then just adds another layer that someone has to work through and try and massage into the format they need or something. I say, really getting the data accessible, making it easy to make these decisions is going to just help people get access to this information, and it's not going to stop. There's going to be more data added to the system as time goes on. There's more information that is available, and again, it's just getting this to a point that we can get it available, get it surfaced. And we're not just talking around, say, a provider like us. We're talking across the organizational technical landscape. There is going to be so much data that I've got, and most of the time it sits there. Interpreting it and making it accessible and understandable is going to be the way forward for a lot of organizations trying to get further results here.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Richard. I can see Keith's got his hand up, so I'm just going to allow Keith to come in, and that if you've got a question, Keith, you are welcome to ask it now.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Thank you. I guess a little bit of feedback from the transport sector anyway. A lot of companies are doing an awful lot in this space already, utilising enriched data from their providers to really drive improvements within their own businesses, whether it's through, like you say, route optimization, reducing emissions, improve driver performance, and reduce speeds, etc. And many of them then, are also being assisted by partnerships with, like you say, like insurance companies, etc. So a lot of them are on that path and well down the journey already. And yeah, they're constantly sort of looking and resetting those values all the time. So they're actually always tracking to try and improve overall performance. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people doing that. I think one of the things that's potentially a huge opportunity for certainly the telematics providers is being able to provide some oversight or insight back to things like the regulator, NZTA, etc., through anonymised data that actually says, right, so for average fleets of this size with this many people, these are the trends that we're seeing, whether it's overspeed events across the board or specifically overspeed events in relation to the actual current speed environment as well. I think there's huge potential around, helping to drive, some of that result data so that then, RCAs, road controlling authorities, the regulators, etc., local communities can actually look at, what can we do to improve the road safety environment within our communities, and also, time of use, all that kind of stuff is all going to come into play as well. So yeah, I think there's massive opportunities, I guess, in the distilling of the data that comes out of the telematics companies and its utilisation. It's just making sure that it's presented in a way that it makes sense, is meaningful, and it's easy for the providers, I guess, to get that data into the right streams and buckets, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Keith, those insights. And certainly we also see a lot of fleet operators who are doing quite a lot in this space already and on that journey already. But yeah, like you said, there's some good insights that we can get from a lot of those things to help others in the future, with the operators, but also the wider community and road safety more generally as well. So thanks for that, Keith. Richard or Hamish, do either of you want to add to that?
Look, I think that you made a really interesting point around, we do collect a lot of information, how better it can be used from the regulators, NZTA. We have a relationship with them. We don't really share any of that information up. As I said before, we keep it very contained within the organisation. But I think there is scope through anonymisation that we could be potentially sharing some of this stuff for to help with the community regulators around certain areas, especially when you think around the routes. Why are these certain routes more problematic than others? We've got data to prove they are, and that potentially could be some pretty valuable information that could be used by them.
Just building on that, yeah, absolutely. I think Keith has touched on something, a bit of a theme that I think has been around for a while, and various sort of investigations and projects that I've been involved with. The theme of data collaboration has been very strong, and the desire to see better collaboration both downwards from government and upwards from the industry to government and everyone in between. So I think anything that chips away at that and allows better collaboration through the safe use of shared data, I think is going to be helpful and would be in line with reinforced themes over a long period of time. Yeah.
Thanks, Hamish. Thanks to Richard as well. That's great. I'm aware we've run slightly over time, so we're going to wrap up the questions there, but thanks very much for all of that. I'm just going to wrap up the session very quickly now as well. So just to let you know about a couple of other events that we have coming up, all of our events are advertised on the Global Fleet Champions website, so you can see details of forthcoming events on there as they're set as well. On the 11th of November, we've got a joint seminar we're running with AFMA in Auckland looking at fleet management, including safety, environment and technology. And the winners of the 2025 Australasian Fleet Champions Awards will be announced in the evening as well during that event too. And we'll also have some more webinars on chain of responsibility and sustainability later in the year as well. So keep an eye out on the Global Fleet Champions website for that. And Break, as I mentioned at the start, we are a charity, so we are reliant on donations, fundraisers, and our corporate supporters to help us to continue our work. There are a range of different ways that you can work with us and support what we're doing. Whether it's you can find out more by going to various parts of our website, or feel free to get in contact with me to discuss further as well. So finally, I hope you found today's webinar useful and interesting. And thank you again to both of our speakers today, to Richard and to Hamish. We really appreciate you giving up your time for this. To our sponsors, SmartTrack, and to all of you for taking part. And we hope to see you at another event again soon.